So this is a very specific talk on Christian nationalism, which is under the banner of Christian anti-Semitism. There we go. Okay, so this is my grandmother, Rose Krupnik. That was her maiden name. And my grandmother raised me. My father was killed by a drunk driver when I was 4. So my grandmother raised me on Russian kreplach and Jewish humor. And my grandmother, when she was about 25 years old, her parents were Orthodox Jews, and she converted to Christianity. And so, as a result, her mother and father said, "We love you, but we can never speak to you again." And so they never did speak to her again her entire life. When she was dying, I remember the day I was a young teenager, and my grandmother's sister came up from LA. We lived in Northern California. It was a red Cadillac. Her husband was a Hollywood producer, and she got out of the car with one of those long LA cigarettes with red high heel shoes. And she came in to pay her last respects to her sister. These are my grandmother's 4 first children. She had 11 children, and these are the first 4. Nathan on the left, Sarah, Miriam, and in the suit, the dark suit, that's my father, Zev, who died when he was 31 years of age. So my great-grandmother is here on the right. That's her daughter, Paulina, son-in-law, and granddaughter. And so my great-grandmother, she never would see me because of the issue of my grandmother's conversion. So I grew up feeling like the other, right? And so my great-grandmother was alive till I was probably 18, 19 years of age. She was just a few hours south, but she just didn't want to connect with 28 grandchildren. And I never understood that. I didn't know why I was the other. I didn't understand Christian anti-Semitism. I didn't understand the roots of it. And so my great-grandmother, she escaped. She and her husband, Jacob, he passed away before this picture was taken, in 1899 to escape the suppression of Russian Jews. When they came to America in 1903, there was a pogrom, and it was called the Easter pogrom. And the New York Times writes about it as the Kishinev pogrom. There was a well-laid-out plan for the general massacre of Jews the day following the Orthodox Easter. The mob was led by priests, and the general cry, "Kill the Jews," was taken up all over the city. Jews were slaughtered like sheep. And so my uncle, Nathan, that was in that picture, in his middle age, he connected with my great-grandmother, the first and probably only. And she told him the story that in 1903, when that Kishinev pogrom happened, when Christian priests and a mob of Christians murdered Jews, it was my great-grandmother's family that they were all murdered in that mob. So you can imagine, and I didn't understand this, but you can imagine the angst that they would have had with my grandmother converting to Christianity. They probably wished that she would have converted to Buddhism or something, or atheism, but never Christianity. So there was never any connection. So there was a resentment, a rejection that was in my own soul. And this is my family, my grandmother's brother, great-grandmother's brother, my grandmother's uncle, Shlomo, and Sima, Boxerman, and their family. The girl in the polka dotted dress in the left, she witnessed the murder. And so the Nazi Eisengruppen came in, and they dragged my grandmother's family out of their home, and the soldiers all had crosses on their belts with the words, Gut mein uns, God is with us. And so again, my family is a family that was ripped apart by Christian nationalism and Christian anti-Semitism. So they were all shot point blank in Trostinets, Belarusia. The girl in the polka dotted dress escaped, and she later on reported to Yad Vashem the day they were murdered, how they were murdered, and the rest. So I grew up with this sort of rejection by my Jewish family. I went into the ministry, went to seminary, became a pastor, And so for probably 20 years, I was teaching and preaching replacement theology. That wherever you see the word Zion in the Bible, that is really speaking about the church. The church has replaced Israel. I even went to conferences on replacement theology. And this is a whole long story. I won't take time to tell it, but in 2002, sitting in my office, I'm a pastor. I had 120 employees. And I'm sitting in my office, probably writing a budget of something, and I have an epiphany. I just start weeping. And I said, my grandmother's dying prayers that I'd go to Israel and reconcile with her family. There was a family member that had escaped, a brother that had left before the Nazis came in. He was living in Israel, had 4 children, and go and find my family. I totally rejected it, didn't want anything to do with my Jewish identity. And so that just began a journey. And I have this epiphany, go to Israel, find your family. The next day I get a letter from the Israeli government inviting me on an all-expense paid trip to Israel. It was already in the mail when I had this, whatever you want to call it, epiphany. And a month later, I'm on a flight to Israel where I met my family, and we reconciled, and it was back and forth since. I have 100 family members in the state of Israel. Okay, so today we're going to look at an examination of the anti-Judaism and anti-Semitism woven into the fabric of contemporary Christian nationalism in the United States of America. You've all heard the phrase, the canary in the coal mine. And so I want to talk today about the canary in the coal mine. And if you don't know the story, canaries are ultra-sensitive to methane gas. So the early coal miners would bring them into the mines because if the canary stopped singing, the coal miners knew this is an emergency. The alarm has sounded and we've got to leave the mine to save our lives. The coal miners really loved their canaries, and so they actually built a canary resuscitator. And in the British Museum, there's an article by the curator who says his favorite artifact out of like 200,000 artifacts in the museum is the canary resuscitator. And so the little hatch opens up so the canary can get air, but if the canary passes out, they close the hatch and they turn on the oxygen and the canary is revived. So canary in the coal mine simply means, if anti-Semitism is spreading, it's an alarm that should be sounded. So the premise, Christian nationalism is rapidly expanding the U.S., and sewn into the fabric of this movement is viral anti-Semitism. The problem, significantly few Christian leaders are addressing this growing trend. The canary has stopped singing, but Christians are not paying attention for the most part. The definition, and lots of people have asked me this week, what is Christian nationalism? This is by Russell Moore, who's the editor of Christianity Today. Christian nationalism refers to the use of Christian words, symbols, or rituals to shore up an ethnic or national identity and distinguish their group from those they define as outsiders. And this is my own definition that's in the Times of Israel article I wrote. The growing Christian nationalist movement in the U.S. seeks to convert America into a Christian nation by changing laws and taking over state and federal government institutions. The rhetoric of the movement is quickly mutating, becoming more violent due to the fact that it is reactionary and fear-based. Christian nationalists have always needed a nefarious character, an enemy representing evil they can blame for the problems of their time. Historically, the enemies of choice for Christian nationalists have been Jews. When Christian nationalists talk about globalists, the media, Hollywood's immorality, and the world's banking system, all enemies of Christian nationalists, they are often referring to Jews. Christian nationalism is a religious cult. It is unchristian, but employs Christian concepts and discourse to deceive its followers. Those who serve up the Kool-Aid to the masses have sold out their Christian conscience to the seduction of power and position. At its core, Christian nationalism is a political ideology of protest. It's a revolt, some would say an insurrection, against anyone or any institution opposed to its fundamental belief that America's national destiny must be Christian, and it is a Christian's duty to persuade the government by force of fiat if necessary to return to its Christian heritage. But Christianity was never meant to be a political ideology. On the contrary, Christianity finds its purpose not in protest, politics, or power, but through loving justice, showing mercy, especially to the poor. And so, all of us here, we've talked about a story this week. And so for me, as I shared my story up front, why I'm doing what I'm doing is because I want to, somehow I can reach back in time and into Trostenets, Belarusia, And if I could somehow save my family from Christian nationalists that brutally murdered them, I would give my life for that, to protect them. So that's why I do what I do. That's my story. So the stats, Christian nationalists by the numbers. And this is from the Brookings Institute that did this survey in just a couple months ago in 2023. And I'll just go through it. I won't take time to really dive into this. So Christian nationalists by the numbers. U.S. government should declare America a Christian nation. We're looking at 27%. U.S. laws should be based on Christian values. We're looking at 40%. If the U.S. moves away from our Christian foundation, we will not have a country anymore, 38%. Being Christian is an important part of being truly an American, 30%. And then God has called Christians to exercise dominion over all areas of American society, 20%. So you're talking about a nation with 350 million people, and just run the numbers on that. 20% of 350 million people, 30% of 350 million people. We're talking millions and millions of Christians that believe in the Christian nationalist ideology. Some subgroups that you can look at later. So basically, here's another one. Jewish people stick closer together than other Americans. 58% of Christian America. Jewish people are more loyal to Israel than America, 44%. American Christians love Israel more than most American Jews do, 40%, and on down the line. So basically, the basic number is about 30 to 35% of Americans adhere to or are sympathetic towards the ideology of America becoming a completely Christian nation. This was at the Capitol insurrection, January 6th. If you would see the pictures, there's crosses, there are people carrying Bibles, and this lady puts Jesus in a MAGA hat. This is by an artist. He's a Christian nationalist artist. His name is McNutt. So here's Jesus holding the Declaration of Independence, and if you look in the right of the picture, my right of the picture, this right, he gives the interpretation. If you can see real clearly above the gentleman, he represents Hollywood. Behind him is Satan whispering in his ear.
Where's that?
The dark complected, right here. It's fuzzy. He did it on purpose. He's whispering into Hollywood's ear. And again, Christian nationalists, it's the Jews who represent Hollywood. Down in the far right corner, that's a banking Wall Street guy, again, dark complected, Jewish, counting his money. The lady with the microphone, that represents the media. So those are the enemies of Christian nationalism. Okay, the challenge: communicating the dangers of contemporary Christian nationalism to Christians who are merging their religious and political ideologies with anti-Semitism and are indifferent, in denial, sympathizers, or supporters of Christian nationalism. Mark Twain said, "It's much easier to fool a person than to convince them they have been fooled." And so we're dealing with a populace of people that are being fooled by an ideology that is completely unchristian. Alex de Tocqueville, "No man can struggle with advantage against the spirit of his age and country, and however powerful a man may be, it is hard for him to make his contemporaries share feelings and ideas which run counter to the general run of their hopes and desires." So it's very difficult, it's an uphill climb to convince people that are persuaded by Christian nationalism that they're wrong. And then by one of the best historians on the planet, Agent K, humans for the most part don't have a clue. They don't want one or need one either. They're happy. They think they have a good bead on things. 1,500 years ago, everybody knew the earth was the center of the universe. 500 years ago, everybody knew the earth was flat. And 15 minutes ago, you knew humans were alone on this planet. He's trying to convince the character of Will Smith that there are aliens in America. Imagine what we'll know tomorrow. And so people really are indifferent. They don't want to know. They don't want to discover. So that's the challenge. 4 areas of examination in this presentation. Give you a brief historical context. And then we're going to look at anti-Semitism and contemporary Christian nationalism, Franklin Littell's criteria of a potentially genocidal movement, and why is contemporary Christian nationalism developing an anti-Semitic polemic, and what can be done to change the narrative. Brief historical context. Everything has to be rooted in history. And so there's our last talk last summer was on the history of Christian anti-Semitism, but again, this is particular. This is specifically talking about the root of Christian nationalism. And it begins with Justin Martyr. I think Joel and others had a slide of Justin Martyr. The true spiritual Israel and descendants of Judah, Jacob, Isaac, and Abraham are we who have been led to God through this crucified Christ. We who have been quarried out from the bowels of Christ are the true Israelite race. They, God's promises to Israel, are not yours but ours. We too would observe your circumcision of the flesh, your Sabbath days, and in a word, all your festivals, if we were not aware of the reason they were imposed upon you because of your hardness of heart. Okay, so what happened is, fast forward from Justin Martyr, the 325 AD, which is the Council of Nicaea, that's where Christian nationalism, in my view, began. That's where the connection between church and state happened at the Council of Nicaea. And most Christians would say it was a wonderful conference. That's where we declared, who Christ was theologically, but mixed into that conference was deep anti-Judaism and deep anti-Semitism. It's where Christianity basically started its own gig and broke away from its Jewish inception. And truly, in the first place, it seemed to everyone a most unworthy thing that we should follow the custom of the Jews in the celebration of this holiest solemnity, Passover, who polluted wretches, having stained their hands with a nefarious crime, deicide, by the way, are justly blinded in their minds. It is fit, therefore, that rejecting the practice of this people, we should perpetuate to all future ages the celebration of the rite in a more legitimate order and have nothing in common with this hostile rabble of Jews. So Constantine, of course, emperor, he built coalition with the church. And a Jewish historian named Jules Isaac, all the way back in 1961, said, after very deep historical research, I say and maintain that the fate of the Jewish people did not take on a truly inhuman character until the 4th century with the coming of the Christian Empire. So whenever the empire attaches to Christianity, it always leads to tyranny, authoritarianism, and ultimately genocide. And you can trace that through history. And so heading back into a Christian nationalist state in America always spells danger for Jews. Emperor Justinian, a few hundred years later in 535, the greatest gifts God gives to men are the church hierarchy, priesthood for the service of men, and the empire for the order of human affairs. So the connection had been made. Fast forward to Nazi Germany, where the church, for the most part, there was a small confessing church that would not submit to the Nazis. It was very small. The majority of evangelical churches across Germany and Catholic churches embraced Nazi ideology, often begging the Nazis to allow them to hang swastikas from their pulpits. Martin Sass, Bishop of the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Thuringia, Germany, did you know this? That Kristallnacht was on Luther's birthday. On November 10th, 1938, on Luther's birthday, Kristallnacht, the synagogues are burning in Germany. Luther was the greatest anti-Semite of his time, the warner of his people against the Jews. He was a Lutheran bishop. And then, I won't take the time to read this, but you can read it later. Father Wilhelm Schmidt says the same thing. It's the duty of every German Aryan and German Christian to fight against the Jews and destroy them, because the Bolshevik Jews are coming into Germany and trying to invade our Christian nation. It's our duty to defend ourselves against the Jew. Two good books on this subject. Richard Steigman Gall's book, The Holy Reich, just shows how Christian nationalism was at the core of the Holocaust. And then another by Susanna Heschel. I did not know that she said that Israel is an apartheid state. But this book is an outstanding book. I've interviewed Dr. Heschel in my radio program. It's a incredible history on an organization that lasted through the entire Holocaust, the Institute for the Eradication of Jewish Influence on German Church Life. And it was supported by most evangelical churches in Germany. A new book that came out about 2 years ago, published by Harvard Press, by Charles Gallagher. Have you seen this book? It's called The Nazis of Copley Square, The Forgotten Story of the Christian Front. I had no idea. I contacted Charles. I'm going to do a series of interviews with him. He's a Catholic priest and a professor of history at Boston College. And this was a group of Christian nationalists. They were called the Fronters. They armed themselves with grenades, machine guns, weapons, and they were planning an insurrection against the United States government. This is back in the 30s. Fronters believed firmly in deicide, the idea that Jews had killed Christ, and their leaders moved them from this age-old position towards a distinctly modern and violent blend of anti-Semitism and anti-communism. And so what their worry was that Lenin Bolshevism was going to come into America. And so the last line there says, Jews had killed the earthly body of Christ before. Now, under the guise of Bolshevism, Jews were persisting in that most horrifying sin by killing Christ's mystical body as well. And if you look at Christian nationalism, that thought is woven from Nazi Germany all the way up to today, that the Jews are kill the earthly body of Christ, deicide. Now they're trying to destroy Christianity in America. Okay, if you guys know this one, I won't play it, but this is Father Coughlin.
That among other things in the National Union for Social Justice, we are Christian insofar as we believe in Christ's principle of love your neighbor as yourself, and with that principle, I challenge every Jew in this nation to tell me that he does not believe in it. Of communizing all the factories and the fields and the forests and the mines under a new kind of God made of flesh and blood and clay and hatred.
This is the United States of America. Father Coughlin had a radio program in the 1930s. All the way up to probably 39, 40, called The Hour of Power. He had 30 million weekly listeners. He was supported by the Ford Foundation. He was connected to the German Bund. He was connected to the Nazis of Copley Square, the Christian Front. So think about that. America at that time was about 120 million people. 30 million people were Christian nationalists. This is the Nazi rally. Madison Square Garden. These are Christians. Again, connected to the Christian Front in Boston. This is the German Bund in New York. God and Country. It's 1939 Madison Square Garden.
Ladies and gentlemen, I feel demand that our government shall be returned to the American people who founded it. If you ask what we are actively fighting for under our charter, first, a social, just, white, Gentile, ruled United States. Second, Gentile-controlled labor union, free from Jewish Moscow directed...
Free from Jewish Moscow control.
Who was that guy?
He was the leader of the German Bund. God Bless America, they sang at the events. Okay. All right, anti-Semitism and contemporary Christian nationalism, and we're going to look real quickly at Franklin Littell's criteria of a potentially genocidal movement. You can look up his papers at Temple University, and this is a paper he wrote for Yad Vashem back in 2000. And Franklin Littell, in the introduction to this paper, when we come to the question of political responsibility in a world as explosive as ours, we must begin to make some distinctions. To do this, I would suggest testing the overt behavior of political movements according to the following 15 criteria. If out of 15, 10, or 11 clearly apply to some current movement, it's time for the alarm bells to start sounding. So if you can find 10 out of his 15 criteria of a potentially genocidal movement, the canary has stopped singing. So if you want to read a great book, it's by Dr. Patterson from ISGAP, Legacy of an Impassioned Plea, Franklin Littell's Crucifixion of the Jews. Okay, so here's I found 10. He said if you can find 10, you need to sound the alarm. So I found 10. The movement prints, distributes, and uses anti-Semitic material for the recruitment of members. Do we find that today in contemporary Christian nationalism? This is an organization called Reawaken America. They're attracting 7,000 to 10,000 people to their events. If you look at the poster, the top, they're the supposedly righteous against the unrighteous. At the top, there's a Holy Bible. At the bottom, there's a serpent. This has the protocols of the Elders of Zion written all over it. The phrase reset, the concept comes from the protocols, that the Jews are going to basically close down civilization and reform it based on their humanistic ideals. So the whole idea of we're worried that the country's going to be reset. On the picture at the bottom, that's Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum. The next is a Jewish man, Soros, Bill Gates. The third is a Jewish man, a Jewish intellectual from Hebrew University. His name is Yuval Noah Harari. You've probably heard of him. President Barack Obama, and then another Jewish man, Zuckerberg. So out of the 6, 3 of the enemies that Christian nationalism is against are Jews. There's an article on Rolling Stones about Reawaken America. It's being covered by the ADL. A lot of Jewish organizations are very concerned. Very few Christians, who's who in evangelicalism, they're speaking at these events. Alex Jones from InfoWars, he's the keynote. This is next weekend, by the way, in Las Vegas. They'll have about 10,000 people there. Christian publishers, people I've known over the years, have all come into this Christian nationalist movement. And then Roseanne Barr, who said a few weeks ago, she hoped that 6 million Jews would go to the gas chambers again.
She's Jewish.
She's Jewish. And she said, I'm saying it as humor, but the ADL came out and said, it's terrible humor.
So she's speaking there?
She's speaking there. She's a keynote speaker. No, I think she still thinks of herself as having Jewish roots. Okay, the Reawaken comes straight from Nazi Germany. This was the Nazi banner. Awaken, Deutschland awake was their motto. True News, Rick Wiles.
Who can't you criticize in America?
The Jewish lobby.
Yes.
On both sides.
Right.
That's right. That tells you who controls the country.
One more.
The way the Jews work, they are deceivers. They plot, they lie, they do whatever they have to do to accomplish their political agenda. This impeach Trump movement is a Jew coup. And the American people better wake up to it really fast, because this thing is moving now towards a vote in the House and then a trial in the Senate. We could have a trial before Christmas. This country could be in civil war at Christmas time.
That's right.
Members of the U.S. military are going to have to take a stand, just like they did in the 1860s with the Civil War. They're going to have to decide, are you fighting for the North or the South? Members of the government are going to have to take a side. Instead of North, South, it's going to be left or right. People are going to be forced, possibly by this Christmas, to take a stand because of this Jew coup in the United States. We have weeks to stop it. That's why I'm speaking out. That's why I'm putting everything on the line, saying this is a coup led by Jews to overthrow the constitutionally elected president of the United States. And it's beyond removing Donald Trump. It's removing you and me. That's what's at the heart of it.
That's right.
You have been taken over by a Jewish cabal, a Bolshevik revolution, and I'm going to tell you, the Church of Jesus Christ, you're next. Get it through your head. They're coming for you. There will be a purge. That's the next thing that happens when Jews take over a country. They kill millions of Christians.
Okay, you've seen enough of that. This is one of the speakers at Reawaken America. He's a keynote speaker.
And the world says, well, if Jesus really came to his own and his own received him not, if the Jewish people are really God's people, then how come all these centuries they've had so much problems and there's been a curse upon them, and Hitler tried to kill 6 million of them, and how come it took till 1948 to get back into their homeland? And why is there right now, by the way, right now, the threat of civil war this month in Israel?
This was 2 months ago, this sermon.
Why are they having so much trouble if they say they really are the people of God? I'll tell you why. Because the religious people declared a curse over themselves generationally. They said, his blood be on us and on our children's children. And God said, okay, if that's what you want, bucko, there you go. And the people of God have been in persecution, punishment, and torment because they spoke that curse over themselves. His blood be on us and on our children's children.
Greg Locke, he's a keynote speaker at Reawaken America. All right, the same action the group uses anti-Semitic material to recruit members is directed against any other ethnic, religious, or cultural community, using targeting and intimidation as a weapon in the quest for political power. You've heard of Westboro Baptist Church. They hate Jews and everybody else. ADL is following them. The same action movement makes anti-Semitic appeals through the media or an evangelistic meeting. It's directed against any other ethnic, religious, or cultural community, using targeting, intimidation as a weapon for quest for political power.
And they're talking about the United States of America.
It's Michael
Talking
Flynn.
about the United States of America, because when
Keynote
Matthew
speaker
mentioned
at Reawaken.
in the Bible, he wasn't talking about the physical ground that he was on. He was talking about something in the distance. So if we are going to have one nation under God, which we must, we have to have one religion, one nation under God and one religion under God, right?
Okay,
all of us
so-
is together, working together.
Yesterday I received the...
Right.
Yeah, he blamed the Holocaust on the Jews
Right. Said that they're...
for killing Christ.
Yeah. This is Reawaken America conference about a year ago. Pardon?
Where does it take place?
It takes place in Las Vegas the 25th and the 26th of this month, which is next weekend.
But it's a national tour.
Why Las
It's a national tour.
Yeah, why?
Of all places.
Okay, this is, so they strike out against not just Jews, they strike out against any enemy. You know that Let's Go Brandon is against the President of the United States. It means F Joe Biden. So at a Christian nationalist event, they're shouting F the President of the United States. Members cultivate violence towards opponents by publishing slanderous charges. Clay Clark, who is the leader of Reawaken America, declares that Yuval Noah Harari is the Antichrist. This is Clay Clark's website. He has a podcast. This is his title of this particular episode of his podcast. Who is steering the Great Reset narrative? Who's at the helm steering this? It's a Jew, Yuval Noah Harari, who he says is the Antichrist. Huh?
What is the Great Reset, somebody asked?
The Great Reset is the Jews are going to reset the culture of the United States of America. So we're fighting the Great Reset.
Not just the US.
Yeah.
Not just the
It's a
US.
Davos-led international
Right.
conspiracy to reset our
Right,
our
but they
economy.
picked up on that.
Yeah.
And they're using it
Right.
against the Jews. Okay, these are some of the quotes from Christians who listen to the podcast. Nazi, I won't say the word, anti-God devils, minions, this is the Rothschilds, royal bankers, war to protect the failed bank Ponzi scheme. A simple rope and a tree would end this worldwide problem. Obviously, the justice system of the world doesn't work. We need a specialist to go around and take these people out and their families, as it's the only way that we can stop it. So these are Christians talking about Noah Harari, saying he needs to be beheaded. The rest are talking about beheading and murder. This is Scott McKay, keynote speaker, Reawaken America. He's known as the Patriot Street Fighter. And he says, Hitler was attempting to break free of the Rothschilds' corrupt money magic fiat system and develop a banking system for the people of the free world. Hitler was fighting the same people we're trying to take down. These people are so elusive and slippery and cunning that we ended up having World War II. 9/11 was a terror attack orchestrated by the same group of people that has done a very good job at hiding under the religion of Judaism. This is another one, Charlie Ward, keynote speaker at Reawaken America. He's a Holocaust denier. By the way, both of his sons are keynote speakers at this event. The movement pursues the politics of polarization, destroying the middle ground of conciliation and compromise. This is Robert Jeffries, who gave the prayer at the opening of the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem, and then went back to his church and said, God sends good people to hell. Not only do religions like Judaism lead people away from God, but they also lead people to an eternity of separation from God and hell. Hell is not only going to be populated by murderers, hell is going to be filled with good religious people, Jews, who have rejected the truth of Christ. So he loves Israel. He does not like Jews. The group of movement deliberately drives a wedge between the generations, alienating young people from their heritage. A very characteristic part of the policy of the Nazi Party. Again, these are by Franklin Littell, his criteria. This is from Andrew Torba, founder of the CEO of Gab.com, who's just written a Christian Nationalist manifesto calling for the total takeover of the United States government and training our children outside of, taking them out of the American system, education, financial, everything. They're going to convert into a Christian nationalist country. Leaders of the movement elaborate a quasi-religious structure of authority and sanction with political hymns, shrines, martyrs, and liturgies. Who would you think would be the martyr of the Christian nationalists? Before and after Donald Trump, historic indictment and arraignment, countless MAGA Republicans, provocateurs have been noting the Holy Week timing and comparing Trump to Jesus. Just as Christ was crucified and then rose again on the third day, so too will Donald Trump, tweeted one right-wing lawyer known for representing January 6th insurrectionists. Okay, the book to the right is a new book that just came out, President Donald Trump, the Son of Man, the Christ. There's Trump.
I don't think I can take that picture.
Trump, but this is not funny. I mean, these people actually believe, he's a martyr. He is their martyr. Okay. Archaic tribal, clannish, and religious symbols are worn by members. And of course, at every one of these events, the t-shirts, the baseball hats, Q is for QAnon, which is deeply embedded into Christian nationalism. The movement practiced deception and confusion of public opinion by launching one-issue fronts. The one-issue front for today's Christian nationalism is the great replacement theory. You've heard of Nick Fuentes. He had dinner with Trump a few months ago. If Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a Jewish woman, didn't die last year so that Amy Coney Barrett, a Catholic woman, could be appointed to the bench, we would still have Roe v. Wade. And added, now you tell me that this is a Judeo-Christian country. You tell me that it doesn't matter that we have a lot of Jewish people in government. We need a government of Christians. Jewish people can be here, but they can't make our laws.
I'm Catholic. I'm a Catholic reactionary. I believe that organized Jewry is extremely influential in the United States and pushes America towards an open society, liberalism, internationalism for their own benefit.
Why is contemporary Christian nationalism developing an anti-Semitic polemic? Theological misinformation, deicide, and which is, the theory that the Jews killed Christ, and replacement theology, supersessionism, triumphalism, that teaches that the church has triumphed over the Jew, churches superseded Judaism. So theological misinformation. Just a little about deicide. The question is, Nostra Aetate, back in Vatican II, wiped out the issue of deicide. The Catholic Church said, we no longer are going to teach or proclaim that the Jews killed Jesus. So that lie has been in existence for probably 1800 years. And so it comes from the idea that the Jews were responsible for killing Jesus. But in actuality, who killed Jesus? It was the Italians. The Romans killed Jesus. And the Jewish leaders did not have the ability to perform capital punishment. That was all in the hands of Rome. So Jesus was crucified on a Roman cross. The nails were driven in his hands by Roman soldiers. And the governor Pilate was the one that passed down sentence. And you can go to the Times of Israel, April 5th, 2023, and there's an article I wrote entitled, "If the Romans Killed Jesus, Should We Blame Italians?" And that will sort of explain the history of deicide. And there's another article in Israel 365 News I wrote April 13th, 2022. "This Good Friday, may the false claim the Jews killed Jesus be canceled." And so you can just, if you take the time, it'll sort of explain where the bad theology of deicide came from. In the article I wrote for the Times of Israel a few months ago, I took my walk. I went to a Jesuit Catholic church on my run. I go in there sometimes just to rest. I'm sitting in there. I'm sitting there and I look up. I'd never seen it before, just the way the sun was coming in. And they have the 14 stations of the cross right under all the windows. I take a quick look. It's not the Romans. There's Roman soldiers standing back a little with the red uniforms, but it's Jews, long noses with hammers, beating Jesus. And it's in all the 14 stations. And I thought to myself, Nostra Aetate, back in the 60s, was supposedly removed that from Catholicism, but the statues are still there teaching this. So I don't know what the percentage is, Charles, but I can tell you in my experience, like whenever I would, preach about Israel, the Jewish people, invariably someone would come up and say, but what about the fact that they killed Jesus? It's ingrained that the curse, like that pastor in the video, they said, "Let his blood be upon us." So what they're saying is, so upon that small group of people who were the Judeans, not the Jews that were in Jerusalem at that time, it's a mistranslation. Judeans were elite political Jews in Jerusalem at that time that were politically aligned with Rome. The Galileans were always against the Judeans. It was a in-house fight, like what's happening in Israel today. And so that small elite group of people, they were there and said, "Let his blood be upon us." So what we're saying is, so a handful of people said that. So what that translates to every generation of Jews for 2,000 years that they're under this curse. So that's the huge default of the issue of deicide. Let's see, psychological manipulation, that's what's happening in the Christian right today, is a psychological manipulation. There are many, many Christians. They love Jewish people. They're not anti-Semitic. But then there's many other Christians, I would say the majority of Christians, they will love the state of Israel. They don't like Jews. And so that's where my Jewish friends, it's complex to them. Where is the disconnect? And so the Christian right, the ones I'm talking here about, the Christian nationalists, they will wave the Israeli flag. They love the state of Israel. Why? Because it's an eschatological. Eschatology is talking about end times. So the eschatological view that the pre-tribulation rapture of the church was established by a guy named John Darby in the late 1800s. He came to America, he taught it to American theologians, and the idea was that Christians are not going to go through the tribulation period because God would never allow Gentile Christians to suffer, right? So there's going to be a pre-tribulation rapture of Christians. So his opponent said, John, it's bad theology because there's people living in Jerusalem during the Great Tribulation. Who are those people? And he said, well, it can't be Gentile Christians, has to be Jews. But then they said, there's no state of Israel, and there's not a majority population of Jews living there. So John Darby said, aha, he started Christian Zionism. It was started by John Darby. That's the smoking gun behind Christian Zionism. Is what drives it is eschatology. So let's help get the Jews to Israel, establish the state, proves that we're getting an early departure out of wrath and trouble, and the Jews will go through the Great Tribulation. So that's how a Christian nationalist can love the state of Israel, but not like Jews. So that's what's growing in America today. And the number of indifference in Nazi-occupied Europe, how many Christians actually became the righteous of the nations and protected Jews? 0.1% of the population of Europe at that time, which was 300 million people. So 30,000 people are recorded by Yad Vashem as righteous of the nations. 0.1%. So I would say today in America, it's probably close to the same number of people Christian people that really love Jews, very small. The number of indifference is probably around the same. Okay, so psychological manipulation, evangelization and recruitment into a battle of good against evil appeals to an individual's need to belong. And this comes from the recent book, The Psychology Behind Christian Nationalism. It was on the previous side, God, Guns, and Trump. So there's this good and evil appeal that Christians are against the evil people, particularly Jews, that want to bring globalization and replace, Christians with others coming in from outside of America. Fear of loss. The others are going to come in. The immigrant, the stranger, they're going to take our jobs. So that's the psychological manipulation that's happening in these Christian nationalist events. The irrational allure of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories such as QAnon. The people that marched on the Capitol were definitely QAnon and Christian nationalists. And QAnon now is growing in the UK. And QAnon, if you haven't studied it, Q is a letter for high security clearance. Anon means anonymous. It started in 2016, 2017. It's a conspiracy theory basically saying that liberals, particularly Jews, are going to take over America. Jeffrey Epstein's blood, and this all gets really tainted, but it's what they believe, that the vaccine was taken in part by Jeffrey Epstein's blood, and a new race of people are going to be established through the vaccine. The blood of our children is on your hands. Have you read about this? It's called adrenochrome. How many have heard about that? Adrenochrome. You'll see this at the Christian nationalist events. You'll see it all over in QAnon rallies. So what it says is that Hollywood elites today, Jews, are sex trafficking children. It's a blood libel, to drain their blood and turn that blood into a powdered chemical to inject into the elite Jews to help them live longer.
That I heard, but I didn't know the name.
Yeah, it's adrenochrome. That's the drug. Okay, so this is my last point, and I'm done. Jim Caviezel, who played the Christ in The Passion of the Christ, Jim Caviezel is QAnon, and the new movie that's out, The Sound of Freedom, which is about sex trafficking, has beat out Tom Cruise's new movie, Mission Impossible. Already they've received $100 million for that movie. And it's the Christian right that's going to this, because the whole idea of adrenochrome, and Jim is pushing the idea that these children are being sex trafficked so that their blood can be drained to give to liberal Jews. And so the motto of QAnon is "The storm is upon us." And "the storm is upon us" is a QAnon motto, and the belief is that Trump is going to come back into office. And again, it all sounds crazy, but this is what is believed. It's psychological manipulation. Trump will come back into office, and there's going to be a day when the storm happens, when all the liberal elites will be arrested and put to death. And so this is Jim a few months ago at a QAnon rally in all in.
You can take our lives. You can never take our freedom. Every man dies. Not every man truly lives. You. We must fight for that authentic freedom and live, my friends. By God, we must live. And with the Holy Spirit as your shield and Christ as your sword, may you join Saint Michael and all the angels in defending God and sending Lucifer and his henchmen straight right back to hell where they belong.
Watch this now, watch this. Remember what the storm means.
We are headed into the storm.
There it is.
Of all storms. Yes. The storm is upon us.
Wow.
But not without Jesus, our rudder.
At these events, people are baptized in water, and what they're being baptized into is a whole new form of Christianity. Bandwagon effect, the myth that America was built by Christians. So if you look at the statistics in the presentation from the Brookings Institute, the majority of people involved in the ideology of Christian nationalism are white. And you can, cipher through, there are Hispanics, Asians, African Americans, small percentage, but the majority, I think it was 68% of white evangelicals, which the numbers are about 50 million Americans are white evangelicals. So 68% of white evangelicals adhere to the nationalistic ideology. I use the word Christian because the philosopher, I always mispronounce it, Pascal? Men never do evil so much as when they do it from a religious perspective. And so if we don't talk about what Christianity has been responsible for, we create a Christianity that's above history. And I don't want to do that. I mean, you think of the Crusades, the Inquisition, the Holocaust, apartheid, all led by Christian leaders, right? So it's a conversation that needs to happen within evangelical Christianity, because people say, well, I'm a Christian, I would never do that. But historically, we got issues, right? So what can be done to change the narrative? Canary in the coal mine. If we see these things happening and we don't sound the alarm, and here's 10 out of Franklin Littell's 15 criteria for a potential genocidal movement, we have to sound the alarm. Because when anti-Semitism is allowed to go unchecked in a nation, the whole of modern civilization, not just the Jewish people are in jeopardy, but the whole of modern civilization is destroyed. That's why, it's so important to push back. I had a Jewish friend that he read all my articles, and I do radio about all this kind of stuff. He says, man, you got to poke the bear. You're just being too milquetoast. So I started poking the bear, and about 6 months later, he called me back. He says, okay, now you're just poking a little too hard. So you need an insurance policy because you're going to get sued. So I took out a $2 million Lloyd's of London insurance policy because, we have to poke the bear. The Jew is the alarm clock of the world. And I think that's why people just despise Jews, because they remind us of our humanity and they remind us of God's morality. So what can be done is education, and what we're doing here at ISGAP. And I'm done. Okay.